Tractor beams have been around since the very first scene of Star Wars, and they offer an obvious and significant benefit: the ability to hold and even move an enemy ship. So what's the deal with tractor beams? Why don't we see them more often during space battles? All that and more in today's video. Today's video is brought to you by HelloFresh, my favorite meal box. And I'm not saying that because this is a sponsored video, but as someone who's tried multiple meal boxes, HelloFresh's is easily the most varied, the most delicious, and also the most sustainable. HelloFresh makes healthy and delicious eating easy no matter what your circumstances are. If you're like me and you have a family, you can get the family boxes. If you want something quick and easy, well, go with the 20-minute meals. Either way, you'll be trying new and delicious food, skipping some of that takeout, and one benefit that I don't hear mentioned much is it helps you learn how to cook if you're like me and generally clueless. My favorite meal from the recent box was the Greek-inspired sheet pan chicken, and I'll include some pictures for you to check out the process and the final food. If you're interested in trying HelloFresh, you can go to HelloFresh.com and use code Eckhart16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts. Again, HelloFresh.com and code Eckhart16, and will also be included in the description. Thanks to HelloFresh for the tasty sponsorship. Now, on with the video. Alright, so the tractor beam is obviously a staple of science fiction. Star Wars is not the only or even the first franchise to make use of a tractor beam, but I think a bit of a summary is still useful. As explained by the Essential Guide to Weapons and Technology, a tractor beam is a powerful and invisible force field which can capture and move objects with great precision. The more powerful the tractor beam, the greater its range and the mass it can move. Tractor beams can be mounted anywhere from space stations to large capital ships, and as the aforementioned quote suggested, can vary wildly in complexity and size depending on their intended purpose. The Millennium Falcon, for example, as a cargo freighter, had a very simple tractor beam which could only be used to haul in small objects. A large capital ship like an Imperial Star Destroyer, on the other hand, would have a military-grade tractor beam, which could not only freely aim at objects, whereas the Falcons would have been fixed, but could capture ships corvette size and possibly larger. Sticking to the ISD, that ship had 10 turreted tractor beam projectors, each with a full staff manning it at all times. The most prominent and likely most powerful projectors were near the Imperial Star Destroyer's hangar bay, and would work in conjunction with hangar security, a boarding ramp, the lower guns on an ISD, and other defensive measures to ensure the swift and effective capture of enemy vessels. Often, however, when it came to particularly powerful or even fast-moving vessels, multiple tractor beam locks would be required, and that's where the 10 individual projectors of the Star Destroyer offer some benefit. You can also imagine an individual tractor beam sort of locking a ship from one direction. If a ship has enough thrust and force, it can escape that tractor beam, but if it's being pulled from multiple directions, including perhaps its escape vector, well, it's not going to be able to get away. So why weren't tractor beams more frequently used? I mean, you can imagine how even if you can't lock a vessel into place completely, there would be some benefit to slowing it down or to impeding its movement, and that even capital ships of the same size might want to try employing tractor beams against each other. The problem was, well, there are downsides to the tractor beam. Before I get to that though, I want to talk about a few ways that it was employed offensively during battle. On the very small scale, the TIE Avenger and the TIE Defender, alongside some of the more exotic vessels like, according to the new Essential Guide to Weapons and Technology, Geonosian starfighters, employed tractor beams both to help the ship's maneuverability, I assume somewhat like a repulsor lift, but probably to help with aiming against ships that are nearly in their sights. The Dovin Basil is also mentioned in that text, and it's sort of like a tractor beam. The Dovin Basil is essentially a miniaturized black hole. One of its functions was to, well, pull in enemy ships or pull their shields off, but others was to consume enemy munitions and operate as a shield. Probably the most famous offensive tractor beam comes from Star Wars canon and would be the massive tractor beam emplacement used by the Starhawk class battleship. This is a very interesting one. We probably get the best look at the Starhawk in Star Wars Squadrons. That was an experimental version, but we see that the tractor beam can literally be used to shake an enemy capital ship apart, something as large as an Imperial Star Destroyer. The most famous use of the Starhawk's tractor beam was at the Battle of Jakku. There, Rebel starfighters managed to take down the engines of the Super Star Destroyer Ravager, which was above the planet Jakku. The Starhawk Amity used its tractor beam projector to lock on to the Super Star Destroyer and essentially pulled it down to the planet's surface. So, not a traditional use of a tractor beam in an offensive way, but certainly a very interesting one. Otherwise, massive vessels like so big that energy and space aren't a concern, like the Death Star, would have employed tractor beams and did do so quite effectively. Alright, so those are some of the use scenarios. Let's talk about the downside of tractor beams. One kind of obvious employment would be against small ships, which you maybe only need one projector to stop. Maybe you could employ tractor beams as a method of point defense during battles. The only problem with that is if you can hit something with a tractor beam, you can probably hit it with a laser cannon, and you've destroyed it outright. And that's ultimately the thing. Tractor beams do, of course, have utility. But unless you're building the vessel around an advanced tractor beam, something like the Starhawk, most likely that utility will be limited in battle. Could you, for example, as an Imperial Star Destroyer, lock all of your tractor beams onto another comparably sized capital ship and slow it down somewhat? Maybe. Imperial Star Destroyers are very, very massive, and the effect might be minimal. However, tractor beams require an extreme amount of power. According to the new essential guide to weapons and technology, they're generally tied to a ship's main reactor. So you're going to be limiting your ship in other aspects. Even if it's just 5% of the ship's energy, that's energy that could be going to things that give you more benefits, i.e. propulsion, weapons, and shielding. And sure, you can try to add more projectors, but again, turning to the new essential guide to weapons and technology, few warships support the number of projectors necessary to use tractor beams offensively. Tractor beam emplacements consume a great deal of space and power and require constant maintenance. Many tractor beams also require a crew of at least 10 operators and technicians at all times for each projector. Another thing to consider is that many advanced Star Wars capital ships also have other experimental or unique technologies which they need to power. Many ships, especially into the late New Republic era, were routinely being upgraded with interdiction technology, and you also have things like stealth, advanced communications, etc., etc. There were also several methods which could be used to counter a tractor beam. We see this most famously in the Thrawn trilogy. In those books, Luke uses two methods. First of all, on one occasion, he hides his X-Wing into the false shell of a freighter. Once the Imperial Star Destroyer locks onto that, he basically breaks the shell and escapes. And in one of my favorite scenes of the novel, he basically has a war against the technicians of the Chimera, eventually escaping through both some fancy flying and what was known as the covert shroud technique, where he released small reflective particles which interfered with the rays of the tractor beam. The most common way to counter the tractor beam, and one we see, for example, in the Star Wars Aftermath series as done by Wedge, was simply to fire a proton torpedo or concussion missile at the projector, hoping that it would catch and cause major damage such that you could escape. So it's not to say that tractor beams have no utility. Obviously they do. They're great outside of battle, especially if you want to capture a ship but not kill it. There aren't many other great options, although there are some, including harpoons and Connor nets, which I think could be a good option for some. But hopefully you'll understand why tractor beams aren't used more frequently in battles, except in a few unique cases. Also, I would be remiss in a video about tractor beams if I didn't mention Centerpoint Station. This was a super weapon in Star Wars Legends created by the Celestials. It was used for creating the Corellian system, most likely, and could move planets across the galaxy and also create massive destruction with what I believe is called a gravitronic beam, as seen at the Battle of Fondor. Did I miss something? Is there something you'd like to add, or is there a topic you'd like to see me covered next? Make sure to let me know down below. I'll be reading all of the comments. Special thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. You can check the first line of the description and use my code to get some great offers. Until next time, guys, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.